Right. So I'm going to describe the two hormone pathways that you're responsible for. And the first hormone pathway that I'll talk about is the blood glucose regulation one that we learned about last time. And the reason why this one is unique, this one is a little bit different from from a lot of the other hormones that you might be responsible for understanding, because this one's only controlled by a single gland. So it's unusual like that. It's completely controlled by a single gland. And you know the name of that gland is the pancreas. So if I were to kind of draw you a picture of what this looks like, let's say that, I'm not going to draw this very well, but your pancreas kind of looks like this. It's an organ that's right underneath your stomach. And the pancreas, in addition to secreting the two hormones that we're going to talk about, insulin and glucagon, right? The pancreas has a glucometer in it. So you need to know that it contains a glucometer. So it actually measures your blood sugar that's in your blood. Blood's always going through every organ. Blood passes through the pancreas. The pancreas has some way of measuring whether the glucose is too high or too low. And the glucose needs to be at a set point. Because I am a type 2 diabetic, I know that this set point is somewhere between 80 milligrams per deciliter and about 120 milligrams. That 80 to 120 region of blood sugar is good. If it goes any higher than 120, you're in trouble. If it goes any lower than 80, you can be in trouble. You might get the shakes, and then your heart might even stop if you go really, really low. So your pancreas is constantly measuring that to make sure it's within good limits. So if your blood sugar goes too high, right? If it goes above the set point, right? If that happens, what does the pancreas secrete? Which hormone is it going to secrete if blood sugar goes too high? Chat me the answer. Yes, very good, Emma. Very good. Camille, Sky, excellent. Okay, so insulin, that's probably the hormone you know best, right? Is the hormone that's going to lower the blood sugar back down, right? Back down to its set point. Sugar, not sugar. Insulin lowers it back to its set point, back to that. People call it the sweet spot, ironically. Back to that point between 80 and 120, you want it to be in there. You don't want it to go higher. You don't want it to go lower. It's dangerous. Okay, so insulin takes care of lowering the blood sugar if it gets too high. On the other hand, what if the blood sugar goes too low? That could be just as dangerous, right? If blood sugar goes too low, now what hormone gets secreted? Almost, yes, and people mix that one up all the time. Glycogen is not the hormone, glucagon is the hormone. It's really good that we make that point because that's easy to confuse. So the correct name of the antagonistic hormone to insulin is glucagon. That's the name of the hormone. Glycogen is a polysaccharide. It's a polysaccharide that's made of many glucoses linked together, and you have glycogen stored in your liver and in some of your muscle cells as well. And that's a different part of the story. So glycogen is a molecule, a carbohydrate molecule. Glucagon is a hormone, also a molecule, and made of protein. Okay, so what does the glucagon do? It will raise the blood glucose, raises blood sugar Again, back to set point. And we'll raise it. And the way it does that, just so that you recall, the way glucagon raises the blood sugar is to go to the liver cells and instruct and go through a signal transduction pathway that releases glucose from glycogen, which should sound familiar to you. That's exactly what epinephrine does. But epinephrine works in an entirely different triggered situation. Epinephrine is part of your adrenaline, and it's only going to be triggered during a fight or flight situation, so under great stress. Glucagon gets triggered just simply if you haven't eaten in a while, and your pancreas measures your low blood sugar in a non-stressful situation and raises it. Okay, so there's the pathway for blood glucose regulation, and it all centers around a single gland, a single endocrine gland, the pancreas, that secretes two opposing hormones, antagonistic hormones, insulin and glucagon, and this is a negative feedback pathway. It's kind of a double negative feedback pathway. Okay, so don't think that it's different from the way most other hormones behave and regulate themselves. This is still a negative feedback pathway. It's just not as linear as the one we're going to look at next. So next, I'm going to erase this. The second pathway is a new one for you, and this one is for regulation of sperm production and muscle mass, and some other things too, in human males. There. Okay. So this pathway is a lot more linear and has many more glands in it. So first of all, we're going to start with the top gland that is really in charge of everything, the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus is a gland, an endocrine gland. Well, it's not actually a gland. It's actually technically part of the brain, so it's not technically a gland. But the hypothalamus is interesting because it is, like the pancreas, able to measure things, but it's able to measure a lot more than blood sugar. The pancreas can only measure blood sugar. The hypothalamus measures all kinds of things. It measures how much water there is in your body fluids to protect you from dehydrating. It measures your body temperature and signals things if you get too hot or too cold. It measures the amount of salt in your blood, and it measures lots of other things like the amount of testosterone in your blood. Okay, so it measures all kinds of things. Measures many homeostatic variables. Okay. Not many. Sorry about that. Misspelled that. Okay, and then triggers a response, right? Sends chemical messengers to the pituitary, which will then do something about it. Okay, so the hypothalamus, in terms of sperm regulation, it's sending a particular hormone called gonadotropic releasing hormone. That's what it sends to the pituitary gland, which is the next gland in the line. Pituitary gland. Can't spell today. Pituitary gland, which is a true gland, which is a very small gland hanging underneath your brain. So in the middle of your skull, if you could get in there, the pituitary gland is placed right underneath your brain. It's not too far away from the hypothalamus. It's pretty close by, but the gonadotropic releasing hormone does have to travel a little bit to get a short distance. Okay. All right, so the pituitary gland is if it receives this particular hormone, this gonadotropic releasing hormone, it sends out two hormones of its own. One of them is called follicle stimulating hormone, FSH. And one of them is called luteinizing hormone, LH. And both of these hormones go to a third gland in the line. The testes. The testes are an endocrine gland. The testes, which reside in the testicles of human males. And this is also a pathway that exists in human females, but since we're talking about testosterone today in a particular case study, I'm just going to stick with the men for today. Okay, so don't mean to leave you out, girls, but we're just going to do, just to simplify it, just one pathway at a time. All right. As a result of these two hormones reaching the testes will do several things, and we'll talk about them. Yes. Okay. So FSH actually, well, I'm going to let you read about that. As a result, the testes will produce testosterone, which is kind of the final answer here. Testosterone. And testosterone will go to do several things. Testosterone is the hormone that will go and target muscle cells and increase muscle mass, and they will also it'll do a lot of things. Okay. I gotta run. I got to Thanks, Rachel. Okay. Yeah. So testosterone will target muscle cells and increase muscle mass. Hi there. And it will also help with sperm production. There. Just tell me and I'll do it. Okay, so those two things. All right, so here's the thing. If you're going to turn on the production of a hormone that's as powerful as testosterone and does the things that testosterone can do, because I'm not talking about every single thing it can do. There's a lot more that testosterone is responsible for. But if you turn a hormone production on like that, you've got to have a way to turn it off. And that's what negative feedback is about. So here we go. Testosterone will feed back to the pituitary gland and to the hypothalamus, which is constantly measuring how much testosterone there is. And it will turn those two glands off. It will make it so that these hormones stop getting produced. So it is a way of turning off a system. Excuse me just a minute, guys. Okay. Right, so negative feedback. That's negative feedback. It's a way of turning off the production of a molecule, right? Once it reaches a threshold concentration, right? There. Okay. So you see how this is more of a linear progression, right? This gland tells this gland to do something, and then that gland tells another gland to do something, and then that has a final product down here, the testosterone, which can build up enough, right? Once it's at high enough concentration and is doing all of the things that it needs to do, it will go back and turn off the original glands, turn off the original initiating signals, so that its concentration doesn't become too high. Too much of anything in the body is dangerous. So there are lots of these negative feedback pathways in the body to make certain that there's a way of regulating things. You turn something on, got to have a way of turning it off. So this is also a negative feedback pathway, just like the blood glucose regulation is also negatively feeding back on itself, even though there's only one gland controlling it. Okay.